And it's strange to have to say that, doesn't that? That kind of makes common sense. But there have been cases where that has occurred and everybody gets sued. They didn't find anything, everybody gets sued. If there's going to be any kind of a strip search done, my advice to my administrators that I talk to is let the police do it. Okay? So general rule number one is you don't do searches of students. That's done by the administration. And if somebody would advise you, tell you, hey, I want you to strip search this student, your answer is, hold on, just wait a second. We need to think about this, okay? Based upon the information that I've received, the training I've received, this is some dangerous ground that we're on, okay? Thoughts about that? Yes?
What about, like, I've had to take a cell phone away from a student before, but he refused to give it to me. So I had to send him down to the principal. But in that case, like where you're, can I have the cell phone? They're hiding down their body. I didn't touch him. I just asked for it, and he wouldn't give it to me. But if he were to give that to me, is that considered a search? Is that against anything? Or
That wouldn't be a problem at all, okay, what you just did, as long as he gave it to you. But you couldn't, yeah, I wouldn't say, hey, stand up for a second, and then start patting him down, saying, wait a minute, this is a cell phone here. Right, you handled it just perfectly. And really what that is now, it's no longer, hey, you just had a cell phone. Now it's insubordination. Okay? I'm directing you to give me that cell phone. If you don't give me the cell phone, you're going down to the office. And it's no longer that you just had a cell phone, which may be this classification, but now I've given you a lawful directive and you refused it. So now you're going to be in more trouble. So
if they willingly just give it over, it's no big deal.
No.
But basically just stay away from them if they won't and send them away.
you handle it perfectly. Okay.
John, I have a question.
Yes.
At one time, the schools had a lot of bomb scares. And
Yeah.
we see them occasionally now. Students are ordered out of the buildings. Teachers are said, search lockers. You're responsible for this area.
No
So,
problem.
No problem?
No problem. Especially if your school handbook, which they all should have it by now, which says that students have no expectation of privacy in their lockers. School lockers are school property, okay? Just like a teacher's desk, any kind of commons area. Not only is it in the case law, but there's also statutory provisions now in Illinois that says students do not have an expectation of privacy there.
I'm talking about putting the teachers at risk.
You would not be at risk, okay? Under
There
that.
was a bomb in a locker.
Oh, I see what you're saying. All right.
The teachers are required to search the lockers. Bomb scare.
I don't know that that's a good practice, okay? Legally, can you search lockers? Yes, you can. Practically, would I ever ask a teacher to go search a locker for a bomb? No, okay? That's when we call in the bomb squad, okay? We have the dog sniffing, the bomb sniffing dogs come in and smell the lockers, etc. Okay?
What about book bags?
Okay, well, there's a little bit greater expectation of privacy when it comes to book bags or purses. Okay? Now, the law says, the statutory provision in Illinois states specifically that if those items are left unattended in a commons area, then in order to determine who the owner is, we can search those. Okay? But if a kid is carrying a book bag, all right, he's carrying a book bag, unless I have more reasonable suspicion that there's something in this book bag that violates the law or school rules, I can't search it. Okay? The old saying is that student teachers do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. Just because we're in a school doesn't mean that as an administrator I have free reign. All right? Well, what would a reasonable suspicion be in that case? It might be that, well, this particular person's eyes are a little glassy. They kind of a funny smell to them, all right? I have somebody else come over and take a sniff, and they say, yep, they've been smoking something they shouldn't have. And so now we may have reasonable suspicion. Now we have reasonable suspicion to ask that student to turn out his pockets, allow us to look at his book bag. We would always ask him to do that and proceed from there, okay? But that's not your job. That's before you even get to that point, that's when you call the administrator and say, hey, Jimmy here has a funny odor, all right? They may want to check it out.
Would that be the same as cars?
cars for kids.
Yeah, like their cars.
Now,
It'd be like saying-
there are some schools that have put in their policies that if you park on school property, you have no expectation of privacy in your car. I'm not aware that that's been litigated as of yet to determine whether or not that policy overrides your constitutional rights or not. It's an interesting question because driving to school is a privilege, it's not a right. So maybe we can do that. But the way we would normally handle it is that your dog would come and give you an indication that there's something in that car that needs to be gotten to, and that's when we give you the reasonable suspicion to do that. I couldn't just go through, I would not just go through personally, as a matter of practice, and randomly just search kids' cars without more. Okay? I might do that. I would do that with lockers. I'm allowed to do that with lockers. I wouldn't do that with cars. Okay? How about, yeah, district's policy regarding corporal punishment may allow teachers to use physical force to discipline students. No, we can't use corporal punishment anymore. But of course, some of you in special ed are trained to do what? That's right, to use restraint. And so that's the reason I put the asterisk there. There is that exception. Students who misbehave at school-sponsored co-curricular events are acting as private citizens and cannot be disciplined by school authorities. Of course, that's false. Right? What they do at the field trip to Chicago, okay, is just like they did it in the school library. Okay? They're still under school authority and school control. Okay, next. 28? What was that? Oh, okay. It depends on the circumstances. The general rule is, I'm sure you've been told, you don't put your hands on kids. Period. Okay? Keep your hands off the kids. Right now, you could come up with a scenario where if you're in some high school, even some middle schools, or from what I've heard, even some elementary schools these days, that if you had a student that you thought was a danger to himself or to others, okay, it might be appropriate for you to reach out and grab a hold of that kid before he's, thrown the first punch. Okay, so you could come up with a scenario where that might be appropriate, but that's a fact question and will be determined by a jury. Well, what are the circumstances? Well, the kid was screaming in this other student's face, had his fist balled up, and it reared back like he was going to punch the kid. And I was standing right there, and he was going to do it. These guys had a history in the past. They had fought just 3 days before. They were going at it again. That's the reason that I took the action that I did. Okay? All right? Yeah.
But if, I think that this varies between school systems. For example, if you have a student with behavior disorders and they're, about to attack or even you, different school districts have different takedown procedures.
Absolutely.
That you have to be actually trained for. Within that instance, you would actually have to have training, correct?
No. Well, if you're talking about in a BD classroom,
Yes, because there's to use specific types of takedowns.
I know that that's the case. If you're in a BD self-contained classroom, everybody's got to be trained to be able to do that. However, if that BD kid is in my lunchroom, even though I may be a teacher untrained in those kinds of things, I don't know that I could rely upon that defense. Yeah, I don't know that I could rely on that defense that, well, hey, I wasn't trained, therefore.
Right,
But-
but I mean, you would protect.
Absolutely.
I understand.
Yeah.
But to use a specific type of restraint, you're supposed to be trained.
And that's exactly right. And that's an important distinction to make. Those of you that are in special ed, as you know, you're very special. You have special rules that apply. So that's the case. Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts about that?